So, who made God? Who made God? Like, I think a lot of people have been asking this question, like, where did God come from? Like, if God made us, then who made him? You know, like, I've heard a ton of people ask this question, and no one can actually come up with an answer. You know, I don't believe it's stated in the Bible anywhere concerning how God was made. You know, but everyone assumes that, you know, God has to come from somewhere. I mean, if we came from somewhere or if we came from him, then where did he come from? So, with this episode, I'm going to break down that question, and I hope a lot of people are going to be blessed by it. And yeah, I just hope it's going to make sense, and it will put a lot of people to rest, that it will put this issue to bed, you know. So, who made God? God has always been there. God has always been there. Even if most people don't believe it, God has always been there. No one created him. He has never had a beginning and he's never had an end. And one would ask, how? How is that possible? I mean, there's no way. How has he not had a beginning? How does he not have an end? So let me give you this scenario, right? Let's say I am a God, right? I am a God, and I create a world, right? And in this world, I put beings. Much like God created us, I also create my own beings, my own creatures. And I say, for these creatures to survive, every hour they have to clap their hands 5 times. Every hour they have to clap their hands 5 times. If they don't clap their hands 5 times, they're going to die. Okay? And I say, for them to survive, maybe for them to breathe, they need to drag their feet. You know, that's how they breathe. Us, we breathe with our nose, but they say, for this example, I create them in a way that they have to drag their feet to breathe. So, in their mind, because they are limited by the world I created for them, they assume to say, you know, any being who has to survive has to clap their hands 5 times. You know, it doesn't make sense for them to not clap their hands 5 times, because that doesn't make sense. You know, how can someone survive if they don't clap their hands 5 times? You see, because that's how I made them as a God, that's how I created them. So when someone comes and says, you know, actually, the God who made you doesn't need to clap his arms 5 times. The God who made you doesn't need to drag his feet to breathe. You see, it's not going to make sense. Like, how come? That's not possible, you know? For us, we have to clap. That's how we survive, you know? And yet, you are limited by how I made you. Because I made you that way, it doesn't mean I exist in the same way. It doesn't mean I operate in the same way. You know, just because God enables us to breathe, it doesn't mean he has to breathe. You know, if you look at the concept of time, right? Isn't it amazing that God knows what's going to happen 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? He literally knows, like 20 years from now on October 23rd, this person is going to go and play basketball at this particular court, maybe in Ndola or in Kitwe. He already knows that that's going to happen 20 years from now. You see? But us as human beings, like, we don't know that. Unless God reveals it to us, we don't know what will happen in the next 10 years. We don't know what will happen in the next 15, 20 years. But because God is a supernatural being, he doesn't exist in the natural world. You find he's able to tell you what will happen in the future. He's able to show you, like Pastor Osagi likes to say, he already knows what's going to happen in 2050. He already knows the technology that's there. So how is that possible? Because as human beings, we don't have that capability to actually know, unless God himself reveals it to us. So we live in a natural world, but God lives in a supernatural world. He's a supernatural being. Angels are supernatural, you know. That's why when we work miracles, when God uses us to heal people, God uses us to cast out devils, you find that we are not doing it in a natural. It's a supernatural phenomenon. healing people, prophesying, that's in the supernatural. No one can do that in the natural realm. So even in terms of who created God, maybe the concept of creation is limited to us. It's limited to us because of how God has made us, because we're in the natural. If you watch people who have out of body experiences, a lot of people that's one thing I love to watch myself. Like if you go on YouTube and you type died and went to hell, or someone died and went to hell, or they went to heaven, you see a lot of them as they're leaving their bodies. A lot of them say that they're able to see what's happening like miles away. They're able to see what's happening on the north, south, west, east. They can see what's happening 10 kilometers away from where they are. You see, they couldn't do that when they were in the natural. And a lot of them say they feel more alive, or they felt more alive when they were outside of their bodies. So when you look at us, like when you look at me right now, I don't know what's happening 10 kilometers from there. You see, because I'm a natural being stuck in the natural world. So some of the concepts that we have here on earth do not relate to some of the concepts we have in heaven. You get it? In heaven or in the spiritual world, for me, if I wanted to go to Lusaka right now, I'll have to get on a bus. It will take me 5 hours to reach there. Or someone will have to drive me there, or I'll have to drive myself. I have to get on a train or a plane, because I'm in the natural world. But if I was in the supernatural world, maybe in heaven, you don't even need to get on a car. You don't need to get on a cab or anything like that, or get on a bicycle. All you need to do is just disappear and appear somewhere else. Another experience I heard is there was a lady who was able to understand all the languages when she had an out-of-body experience. When she went to heaven, she was able to understand every language. You see? But here on earth, there's no one who can understand every language. So what I'm trying to put across is that we are limited by the realm in which we are in. We live in a physical realm. Even for Peter to walk on water, that was a miracle. That was he went against the laws of physics. He went against nature. Nature, if you look at it from a natural point of view, he was supposed to sink. He was supposed to drown. There's no one who can just walk on water. But because he had faith in God, that's why he was able to walk. That's why he was able to do something that was beyond the natural. So, with these concepts we have, who made God, it's because we are limited by the realm in which we are in. We are limited by creation. For something to come up, it means it has to be created, For me to use this mic right now, it means someone created it. For me to wear these clothes, someone made these clothes, someone designed them, someone chose this color. So naturally, because of our minds, we are led to believe that the God who made us was also created. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, because we just don't know. We're in the natural. Unless God reveals it to us, I don't know where I'll be in 30 years. You see? I can't just disappear and appear anywhere else. I can't, there's a number of things I can't do because I'm in the physical world. And because we're in the physical world, because we've grown accustomed, even in terms of breathing, for us to survive, we have to breathe. We have to eat. That's how we survive. That's the life we know. If you don't eat, you're going to die. You starve, you lose weight, eventually you die. Because we're in the physical world. So a lot of us get confused because we are trying to apply the physical principles into the spiritual. And yet they simply do not apply in most cases. So even the issue of creation, God did not have a beginning, he did not have an end. It might seem so crazy, but that's just the way it is. And if you look at thoughts, another concept that God gave me just yesterday, if you look at the issue of thoughts, in the physical, I'm not able to hear someone else's thoughts. You're not able to hear my thoughts. You see, but in the spiritual, God can hear everything we're saying. And it seems weird to say, no, there's no one who can hear my thoughts. Like, it's in my head. But God is able to hear my thoughts. because he's in the supernatural. He's a supernatural being. And the only way I would be able to hear someone's thoughts is through a supernatural way. Supernatural, if God gives me, maybe God opens up that person's mind to me. That's the only way I would actually know that. So who made God? No one made God. God has always been there. We might say, no, God had to be made from something. You can't just come out of nowhere. Oh, he's God. You know, the concept of time, we already see, God already knows what will happen in the year 2060. How does he know that? You see? Because our minds are living in a linear path, you know, are living in a linear mode. We go year after year after year, we get to experience things year after year after year. We think, oh, that's how God is. There's no way God would know what would happen in the next 30 years. But he does, because he exists out of time. You know, if you look at creation, he didn't need to be created. It's us who needed to be created. You know, and so just because we're created, it doesn't mean he was also created. So maybe the concept of creation had come with us. You know? Just because we were created, it doesn't mean he also had to be created. The angels were created, quite right. All those animals that are there in heaven, all those beings that are there in heaven, he had to create. But it doesn't mean he was created. So this is just some perspective for you to say, don't use physical principles to start theorizing, you know, supernatural principles, because that just won't work well for you. So when you look at God, when you look at the concept of creation, that's all supernatural. It's all supernatural. And the supernatural exists beyond the natural. The supernatural is far above the natural, far above the natural. And if you're not careful, you're going to start to question God. You're going to start to question the things of God. You're going to try to make sense of things with the wrong mindset. You know, a lot of things will not make sense to you because you're in a physical body, because you only understand things in the physical. You've grown up on earth. You understand gravity. You know, no man can just fly because you know there's gravity. Whatever goes up must come down. You throw a stone up, it will come down. You know, those are the laws that we live by in the natural world. But those are not the laws that apply in the heavenly realms. And so if you're not careful, you start to theorize and you question a number of things. God is not real. There's no way God can do things in such a way. You know, there's no way. You know, it just had to come from somewhere. You know, this is not possible. And yet it is. You know, I've heard stories. In fact, I've read from a book, should be God's Generals. There was a man whose head was chopped off. I don't know who he was exactly. And you know what he did? He picked up his head and he went to continue preaching. That's not normal. That's not natural. That was supernatural. There was a woman who passed away. And I think it was the husband who prayed for her and she came back to life. And she even said, hey, why did you bring me back? You know, I want to go back to heaven. It's a beautiful place and whatnot. All those people went against the natural. You see, it's not natural for someone to just wake up from the dead. That can only happen in a supernatural way. You know, it's not natural for someone whose head is chopped off to keep on moving and preaching the gospel, for that matter, while carrying the head. I don't know how people didn't freak out by that, but, you know, that's just to give you some perspective. Even in this issue of is God real, who made God and all that, you know, maybe the concept of time is not the same way it is here in the physical as it is in the spiritual. You know, the concept of movement, like I mentioned earlier, moving from here to Lusaka, I'll need to get on a bus, or I'll need some type of transportation, because that's what I'm limited to. I can't just disappear and appear somewhere else, unless I'm a wizard or something. But yeah, what we learn here, what we know here, may not directly apply to the spiritual. It may not directly apply to God, because God is a supernatural being and we are limited. We are limited. Our wisdom is finite, actually. But the Bible tells us that the wisdom is God, or the wisdom of God is infinite. So that's just my perspective, and I believe you've been blessed by this. And yeah, peace.